Welcome to the Actually You Can podcast. I'm Miff Galloway, a performance coach passionate about supporting ambitious and high-performing women just like you who know they have untapped potential just waiting to be unleashed. If you're looking to massively up-level your performance in all areas of life, you've come to the right place. My goal on this podcast is to take you beneath the surface so you can connect with yourself on a deeper level while providing you with valuable insights and the tools necessary to navigate life's challenges and go after your goals with strength, clarity, and wisdom. If you're ready to uncover the truth which lies underneath so you can recognize your powerful feminine leadership style, pursue your goals unapologetically, and thrive in every aspect of your life, hit the follow button and get ready to explore the incredible possibilities that lie within you. Together, we'll uncover your next steps in achieving peak performance, because actually, you can. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Actually You Can podcast. Today, I'm so excited to have Dr. Deborah Heiser with me. Deborah is a renowned applied developmental psychologist, the founder of the Mentor Project, and an expert in midlife and redefining what life after 40 looks like. For today's show, we'll dive into how mentorship can transform both your life and your career, especially as we navigate the challenges and opportunities of aging. Deborah is here to share insights from her book, The Mentorship Edge, as well, and why mentorship is a key ingredient for professional and personal growth. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Deborah. I'm super excited to have you here.
Thank you, Miff, for having me on your show. I'm really excited to be here.
And so I would love to kick us off by busting a common myth. I think when we're younger, we seem to want to put the brakes on aging. I would love to hear from you. What are some really great things we have to look forward to in midlife and as we start to get older?
Oh my gosh, there's so much. I, like everyone else, thought that our whole life is just a physical trajectory, right? Which when you hit midlife, you can expect to not run as fast, wear reading glasses like I am right now, um, and expect a future of frailty, maybe memory loss, possibly depression, nothing we want to have. And
Yeah.
what most of us don't know, and it took me a while to figure out, is that we have a whole emotional trajectory that we forget about. And that only goes up from birth all the way to the end of our lives. So when people ask, parents, what do you want for your children when they grow up? And they say, I want them to be happy. That's really the only time we ever hear that. After that, it's sort of thrown aside. But we really can expect to be happier as we get older and feel good, fulfilled, and content with life.
And how does that happen? Is it just something that happens organically? Is it something that we need to think more about? What's some of the lessons that you've learned through your work as to why that happens?
It, it does. We're built to be this way. So, what we have is a physical trajectory that from birth starts with us, learning how to walk and talk and do all of those things. And that trajectory goes up. And so if you remember how you were and you learned how to do things, you got really adept at them physically. And then right around, 20 or so in our 30s, it starts a very slow, steady decline. On that decline, nobody really notices. It's not like people are running foot races and saying, oh, am I as fast as I was before when I was younger? That generally isn't what's happening with us. And so this decline isn't something that we necessarily notice, but we still continue to fear the inevitable decline that we may have. And so what we have though at the same time is what with our emotional trajectory that only goes up. So if you think about yourself and you get frustrated, do you throw yourself on the ground like you did when you were 2? No, you're have coping skills. We're not the same emotionally that we once were. And we take for granted all of the skills that we've been building up. If we want something, we don't snatch it from our friend and run away with it like you do when you're little. These are the sorts of things that as we develop, we get better and better and better at it. By the time you hit midlife, you don't really care as much about what other people are thinking about you. You're really more concerned with Hey, do I matter in the world? Doesn't matter that I was ever even here. Does my
Mhm.
footprint mean anything to anybody else? Did all of those boxes that I checked along the way matter at all to anyone? So we really kind of do a check in terms of ourselves and what we mean in the world. And that's when we have this sort of shift and we say, I want to be able to give back. And that's a stage, it's an emotional stage. And as a developmental psychologist, I study our development, not just our physical development, but our emotional development. Part of that is stage called generativity, and it's been studied for decades. And in this, it's where we care for others without expecting anything in return. And most people say that
Mhm.
can't be. People don't do that. Well, we all have children, and we don't just, leave them by the side of the road after we have them. We care for them. And we know that as babies, they all they do is they're adorable, right? And we still love them. They're not giving us anything in return other than love. But when we hit midlife, it really is where we're able to take that in a much more profound way where we're saying, okay, I care for others. I care for the world in a bigger way than myself. I'd like to give back. There are three ways we do that: volunteering, mentoring, and philanthropy. And most people don't have the ability to say, put their name on a building, but they can mentor and they can volunteer. And I chose
Yeah.
to really focus on mentoring because that's where we are giving a piece of ourselves. We're generating it, like the term generativity means generating a piece of ourselves and putting it out into the world. So when I mentor someone, they're taking a bit of my knowledge, expertise, or values, and they're moving ahead with that and taking it out farther into the world. So this is the area that excites me. And when other people start to learn about this, it excites them because everyone wants to feel that we're not just standing on a pile of riches alone, but that we're able to share ourselves with others. It makes us feel good. It makes us feel like we have some kind of power in the world.
And what's coming to mind when you share that is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but also what Tony Robbins' adaptation was it, where the highest need that we have is I need to contribute and
Yeah.
give back. But often a lot of us don't actually get there because we're stuck in the middle somewhere trying to survive, trying to build connection or significance. But I love how you've shared that volunteering, mentoring, and philanthropy are really ultimately what we're looking to do as we move to those later stages of life. And just to make sure the listeners are clear, what is the difference between coaching, for example, mentoring and teaching? Like, I think they all get bucketed into the same thing.
They're di-
How does mentorship differ to that?
Okay. So that's frustrating to me all the time because people lump them all together. If you're being paid, then you're not a mentor. So you can take out teaching right there and you can take out coaching. So now, if you were to look at it in a broader way, mentoring is really an emotional connection between people. You have a goal with all of them, to have some kind of a goal. But really, with a mentor, your bigger goal is to get the information into them so that they're using it. Coaching may be, I want you to do a better job at what you're doing at work. And it may not have anything to do with that person's being or the person's personal development in any way. Could, but it probably doesn't. But the biggest factor is if you're being paid, you're not a mentor. And that's a kind of a simple distinction.
I have never looked at it so simply. That's a really, yeah, great way to look at it. And
No,
so
I
you mentioned
I'm
yeah.
so sorry. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in, but I do want to qualify because there are instances where we can be a coach or a teacher and be a mentor as well. And that is when we are doing that in our off hours. So my husband, who's a professor, he wrote a book with one of his former students. He went from her professor to her mentor when he taught her how to do that with not being paid. It was in his off time. So that's where we have a lot of professors are also mentors, but not at the same time as they are on the job.
Yeah, and I think that can make sense too, right? Like if you had a professor and then you moved on, for example, but they still remained in your life as a mentor. I see that happen with number of friends who finish uni or in the workplace and stuff like that as well. I think that's really great. And so, why would someone have a mentor? What have you seen are the benefits of being a mentor and having a mentor?
So, I mean, it's endless. I run the Mentor Project. I'm the CEO of the Mentor Project. And so I've been able to see people who had an idea and it was a dream for them, but they didn't have the funds, or maybe they didn't have the doors that were open to them to be able to do something that they really thought this is a great idea. And mentors were able to walk them through patents and starting a company and doing things that they thought were never possible. So the benefit to the mentee is that you can have your life changed significantly with a mentor. And for a mentor, it's the feeling that you mattered, that you made a change. And I'll give you an example of that because that sounds like sort of trite. Um, what I'm talking about though is something that goes beyond just the personal interaction. There's a guy, his name is Bob Lefkowitz, and he was the Nobel Prize winner in chemistry. And he looked at himself and he said, "Gee, I wonder how it is that I got to where I am. Why am I a Nobel Prize winner and others aren't? Why is it that a whole group of people that I knew when I was younger became Nobel Prize winners and others don't? Is there something unique here?" So what he did was he made like what would be like an ancestry.com, sort of family tree, but he did it with mentors and mentees. So he sort of put himself in the middle and he mapped out all of his mentors above him and the mentees that he knew that were below him and all the people on the side. And he published it
Wow.
in an academic journal. And he went to a conference, and at the conference, somebody came up to him and he said, "I'm 6 degrees Lefkowitz." And he said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, I've read your article, and between you and me, there's 5 people." And Bob said, "So what are you doing?" And the guy told him, and Bob was struck because the guy was talking about Bob's work 6 degrees away from him. And he said it was the most powerful thing outside of like having his kids that he had experienced because he got to see the impact that one thing he worked on had in the lives of 6 people. And it wasn't done, this big snowball rolling. So mentors get to feel like they have a purpose in the world, which is pretty deep and meaningful. And it makes them feel fulfilled and relevant and productive and useful and all of the things that we always want to feel.
Thank you for sharing that story because I think it really highlights the power of the ripple effect. I think a lot of people don't understand quite how much impact you can have just by influencing one person or a couple of people. Because if you have a really tremendous impact on them, it will follow through to their life and then lives that outside that. So, thank you very much for sharing that. That's incredible.
Well,
And something that's relevant for me at the moment is a lot of my parents and my friends' parents are moving into retirement or they're hanging on to their work because they don't quite know what's next. It's like if they don't work, well, what do I do? And I've accumulated all this knowledge. A lot of them are quite specialist in their field. I've acquired all this knowledge, and it's like, well, what do I do with that knowledge? Does it just stay with me? I don't use it post work. And it sounds like mentorship is a really great opportunity to transition from that as a profession to going, I spent my whole life accumulating this knowledge. I'm going to actively try and give it back now. I'm assuming that's sort of what mentorship could look like in later years of life.
that's exactly it. And I'm glad you brought that up because every person who retires and doesn't give back their knowledge and expertise, it's like burning down a library. All of that goes
Wow.
away and is never used again. And then we reinvent the wheel over and over again. And I think that a lot of people who are retiring feel like they're leaving their identity and themselves with their job.
Yeah.
And really, they're carrying a library of the most precious natural resource that we have in the world, which is those skills. It's the talent, it's the value, it's the expertise that they're holding that no one can get back if it's lost. And it really is truly the most precious thing that we have.
And so, what if someone's listening to this being like, well, who cares what I have to say if they have those beliefs about themselves?
It's funny because I work with people like astronauts and astrophysicists and all these like super smart people and who've done amazing things. And they're always like, oh, I feel like I have imposter syndrome. What could I possibly have to say? And we all feel that way. It doesn't matter who you are. But I will tell you, every holiday that you have has a tradition and it has a value about it. So in the United States, we're getting ready to have Thanksgiving. And every year I make the recipes that are from my grandmother that are in her handwriting on a little card. And if I don't make that, it feels like it's not a holiday. If I leave something out, it doesn't feel right. It's the smells, it's the tradition that we have. Everyone can do that. Every single person. A person often people often say to me, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a professional, I have nothing to give. Yeah, you do, because you are in maybe you're religious. Where did that come from? Centuries of mentorship, passing that down. All of the values that get passed down from grandparents to grandchildren and on are things that matter. So there's literally not a single solitary person. There are more than 8 billion people in the world, and there's not one single person who cannot mentor.
Boom, mic drop. I love that. And I'd love to talk more about your book because I think that will answer a lot of other questions that I have. But would you be able to please introduce your book, The Mentorship Edge, and who that's for and some of the contents that one can expect in it?
Sure. So thank you. The Mentorship Edge is a book that is really here to sort of turn mentorship on its ear and talk about it a little bit differently. I talk about mentorship from a mentor's perspective. Most people think of it from the perspective of the mentee and they're reaching out for information from some nameless, faceless individual out there. But I've found that some of the most prominent individuals don't have access to mentees. The same issue exists. They're reaching around looking for people. And most of us don't know that mentorship is, we're doing it all the time. We just don't know it. And as soon as we can acknowledge it, we'll feel better about it. So, an example is we all think of hierarchical mentoring as the only kind of mentoring. You know, you're trying to
Yeah.
pull yourself up to a job or get to a new level of something. Well, there's lateral mentoring and that's where the most impact comes from. And that's where you say, get your mentorship from somebody who has expertise, but they might not even be in your same job. They could be in your same job, but they're in a
Mm.
different department. So you're both at the same level, but you have different areas of expertise. And this can happen all the time where you call upon somebody and you say, this happened to me, like, for example, when I was a student, someone called me and I was in graduate student and she said, oh my gosh, I'm at my job and I don't know how to do Kappa statistics. I know you know how to do that. Can you help me? And I was like, sure. And like, she's like whispering and I'm like telling her, and then she does her project, gets it done. And then she like hands it in and she's like the rock star. That was mentoring, right? And how many times have I had that done? A million times, but most of us don't think about that. We say, oh yeah, I just helped out a friend. We dismiss it, but as soon as we engage in that more and more, um, where we know that we're doing it, we'll we'll look for people who need help and say, "Oh, I think I'll mentor them," or we'll reach out more intentionally to others for help, and that's really what gets the whole spider web going of mentorship. So the book talks about mentoring from those perspectives with examples from people that are well known in the world who've engaged in those forms of mentorship, as well as from grandmas. And it also really does define what mentorship is and isn't, and talks about how it can be used in conjunction with some of the ways that we've traditionally mistaken mentorship to be things like networking or coaching, advising, sponsorship. So I talk about all of those and how they are separately, as well as how you can use those together to maximize everything. And it gives some actionable items for, how you can engage in it in your personal life and at work so that you can really get the most fulfillment in your life in every area.
I love the idea of lateral mentorship because I've always thought about it as hierarchical. I've always looked to whether it's people in my workplace have had senior positions or if it's someone who's in an area that I hope to get into. I'm like, oh, I hope to have your job someday. Would you be willing to be a mentor in that particular area? I had never considered lateral mentorship. And you're right. We often dismiss it, the power of it, because we're just helping out a friend or we just happen to have expertise in a field that's someone who we consider, I'm doing like air quotes because I don't quite like the term, but I don't know how else to describe it, equal. I just go, oh, just helping out a peer. What do you think by reframing that sort of support to mentorship would have on an individual?
You mean if a person's able to see what they're doing, or what the potential is,
Yeah.
it makes them do it
Yeah.
more often. And when you do it, it feels good. It's
Mm.
like if you were to be giving away gifts and you never get to see the person get it. That's isn't there something really amazing when you give a gift to somebody, they open it up and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is fabulous. I love it. It's exactly what I've been looking for." Don't you feel good? That's really
Yeah.
what it turns into. Like, for example, you're doing what's considered modern mentoring. Podcasting was not around when the term mentor was,
Mm.
brought about. We didn't have technology, but you're out giving information to people in a new modern way, and people are taking it and using it. Now it has that little bit that isn't quite as complete where you don't get to see the person who's taking it in. Likely, the people who are listening or watching your show are feeling connected to you. That's why they come back over and over again. So it's still a form of mentoring and it's a modern mentorship. But hey, you do it over and over. There must be something, right, that you're getting out of this that makes you feel good. And that's part of what mentorship is about. So we have it all around us, and
Mhm.
I bet that as soon as you are able to take it in, just how much of a profound impact you might be having on others, it's going to make you feel even better about doing the next episode and the next episode and the next episode.
Yeah, and that's so true because listening to feedback from listeners makes my day. Like I absolutely love it. I obviously get a lot from having conversations like this. This is now I'm looking at this as my sort of mentorship and my personal
It
development.
is.
And
You're
then
a
other people
mentor.
listening to this get it from as well. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. I really love that. And so what are some qualities of a good mentor? Can anyone be a mentor or do we need to develop some particular qualities, some innate within us that make us more successful at mentoring than others? What does
So
that look like?
I look at this, I will tell you one of my pet peeves is when people say, I'm going to give you a list of all the qualities that you need to be a good mentor or a good mentee. It's like if I listed out to you everything you needed to be a good friend. Well, you're not going to
Yeah.
get along with everybody. So mentorship isn't going to be it's not like an arranged marriage where you're like, we're in it for life.
Yeah.
Here we go. You're not going to like everybody. And so it's not going to be an automatic mentorship with everyone. But I'm not going to throw my friend under the bus. Okay. So mentors don't do that. Like it's the same kind of
Mhm.
things that make friendship work that no one has to give you a rule book for. So we don't need a
Awesome.
rule book. Use what feels right to you. If you feel compelled to steal from your mentor or mentee, that is not being a mentor or mentee. If you are feeling meaningfully connected with the person, that you want to be around them without getting a paycheck, that you trust them, that you feel that you have a goal that you're working toward that matters to you both, then you're mentoring. You don't need more than that. I tell people don't overthink it. If somebody calls and asks you for help and you say yes, it's because you want to do it. It's not because somebody's strong
Mm.
arming you into doing it. And that's where, if we follow our own principles of how we behave in society, we're mentoring.
Yeah, and from that, it also sounds like it's up to really you to determine what that relationship looks like. Like, it could be a relationship with someone where you might feel comfortable having them over at your house for a coffee. Sometimes you might be like, "No, I'm not going to take you into my home. That's not what I wish for a
Yep,
mentor." That sort of stuff. Is that correct as well? It's just define what that looks like for you?
absolutely. Look, you could have a great friend and you're not going to vacation with them. And,
Yes.
like we have boundaries for every relationship that we have out there. And some are going to feel really amazing and that we loosen up the boundaries, and others are going to be tighter. Does it mean it's not a friendship or it's not a relationship? Think of that the same way mentorship is. But if you're thinking, oh, I've got to meet with this person, The same way which you would if you were like, "Oh, I don't wanna go there because I'm gonna run into so and so." Then that's not good. Then say, "No, this is not the mentoring relationship for me."
And so we've talked about how powerful it can be for someone later in life to become a mentor. How about someone who's past midlife being mentored and having a mentor? What's your thoughts on that?
Oh my gosh, I'm being mentored all the time. I'm
Yeah.
every time I listen to a podcast that I really am looking to get something meaningful out of, I'm being mentored. I'm being mentored all the
Yeah.
time by everyone I work with who, if I tried to drive the bus in my company by myself, we would have crashed 100,000 times. I need mentorship and I utilize it all the time. And I'm in midlife. So
Yeah.
every person needs to be mentored and they need to um, mentor as well. We think because we're thinking hierarchically, we think if you get to a certain point in work, there's no need for mentorship. CEOs need to be
Yeah.
mentored. If you're not in work, you need to be mentored. You need to get that from everybody. If you want to put it in very basic terms, and people always say, well, have the youngster teach the older adult how to work tech. That is where someone might, like, I mean, that's so overplayed, but it's as simple as that. We need mentorship in everything that we do.
Yeah, and it's like the top level players in sport have coaches. Just because they're incredible and the best in the world does not mean they don't have coaches. And I think and I'd be interested to hear your perspective on this. I've heard, I think it was in some of Joe Dispenza's work, who I'm sure you're familiar with. He mentions that a lot of thoughts and beliefs are established by the time we get to 35. And the way I like to give examples of this is if I tried to educate or encourage my parents to see a different perspective, it's quite harder than it is someone in their 20s. I feel like a lot of their beliefs are really established by that age. And so I feel like from what you've shared, mentorship really enables us as we get older and more probably established in our beliefs and certain of ourselves to continue to grow and develop because
Yeah,
there's always stuff that we can learn. And if we don't grow, I think the opposite is that we die, right? Like if our brains aren't constantly evolving, we become stale.
exactly. Yeah. And we never do get stale. If you were to look at our emotional
Mhm.
development in life, we start out as a little seed and then the tree starts to grow and grow and grow. And it isn't until or end of life that we start to have the fruit that comes off the tree that is actually our
Yeah.
knowledge and our wisdom that goes out to everybody else. So it's up until that time. But again, at the same time, we are still getting mentored. That's part of our growth. Being mentored by others is how we grow. We don't just do it all by ourselves. We don't water ourselves and we don't give ourselves the sun. Those are things that we have to take from others. And, the interesting thing that you mentioned about athletes is that, yes, they may have a coach, which is usually not a mentor, it's a coach, somebody who's
Yeah.
assigned to work with them, but they're usually always being mentored by those around them. How many elite athletes watch the videos of how others do, where they have a colleague who says, "You know what? I see that you are trying to, get the ball in this way in the hoop. You try this." People are helping each other along and mentoring all the time. And it's a different feeling than it is from coaching. Coaching, you are trying to please your coach or, get wisdom from your coach, and the coach has the job to make you learn it. When you're being mentored, you're trying new things. There's a relationship there that is a little bit more emotional.
Yeah, thank you for distinguishing that too, because you can see athletes, they're either analyzing competitors' plays or something like that, maybe with one of their teammates or something like that. That, in my view, from what you've shared, could be a form of mentorship too, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. That would be like a
Yeah.
modern mentorship
Okay.
that again did not exist
Yeah.
before we have technology.
And so, with all this in mind, and you've honed in your expertise specifically on mentorship, what do you hope, if this is your lasting legacy, what do you hope people understand about mentorship?
I'd love this to be a movement where people look to their left and they look to their right and they see mentors and they see mentees, and that everyone is looking at everyone else as a potential connection that is not a competitor, that is someone who helps them run their race and they help them run their race. and that we can see each other in that bigger way.
It's incredible. That is such a beautiful, like, I love the thought of looking left and right and seeing mentors and mentees. Like, I've never thought of that before. I think, especially with the rise of social media, it's the comparison and seeing what people are doing that I don't have, and feeling really bad about it. And a lot of seeing people as competitors, but really seeing everyone through the lens of being a potential mentor or mentee. That's incredibly powerful perspective.
I'm glad to hear that. There was some advice my dad gave me when I was very young, and he said, always ask for help from someone. And I said, but what if they say no, or what if they're busy? And he said, there's always going to be a jerk out there, but you're always going to find us. There will be more people who will want to help because we all love to help.
Yeah.
And that rang true. I
Yeah.
can think of that as mentoring, but that's really the sort of core of mentorship. And that's what a lot of us intuitively know, but sometimes it just takes a wiser family member to tell you.
Yeah, very true. And I think that's one of the beauties of this podcast too. When I started off, I was like, oh, who would want to be on a podcast? And I just started reaching out to people, and people have been so generous in sharing their thoughts and their knowledge. And I'm like, this is incredible. And you're right. People are more than willing to share what they've spent ages learning and all the wisdom that they've cultivated in support of others.
Absolutely. We're a much nicer group of people on this planet than we give ourselves credit for being.
Amen to that. And so, for someone who is potentially a little bit unsure about starting a mentorship journey, whether it's as a mentee or a mentor, what advice would you give them to help to start build some of those more meaningful connections in that space?
So the first thing I would say is to a person to look, and if you see someone struggling with something, it could be at work, it could be anywhere, um, offer to help them. Say, is there something I can do to help? Because if you can't, you probably know somebody who can, and you can get them hooked with a
Yeah.
mentor. And the other thing is that we should all be asking for help. A lot of us feel like we will be seen as weak or vulnerable if we ask for help. But um, the person that you're asking is usually so grateful that you asked them. You want my opinion? I'm valued. That's how people tend to feel. So, my first suggestion would be to go out and connect with others that you see that there's a need. The second thing is there are organizations and places that you can do this. There's the Mentor Project. It's free. If you want to get a mentor, we are a free organization that you can find a mentor. The other thing is that you can go to organizations, houses of worship, whatever you'd like, and you can say, I'd like to get involved to help others to learn whatever it is that you are good at. If that is a tradition that you want to pass on, a value that you want to pass on, think of what's in your core that you want others to know from you and about you that you can give.
Yeah, I love the actively seeking out people who might be struggling with something and just generally offering to help, because I think that also um, goes against the narrative, especially for women, where it's like, I need to be a strong, independent woman or a strong, independent male. It's like, well, where does mentorship fit into all of this? And so, for someone who's in that potential mindset, what would you say to them about asking for help?
Always stronger with a team than you are alone.
Yeah.
So you want to surround yourself with as many like-minded people who may be able to help you as possible. And I'll give you an example of this that might resonate for others that resonated for me. Bill Cheswick, he's one of the fathers of the firewall. That's how we're communicating right now. We're able to safely communicate in this way. He worked for a company called Bell Labs, where everybody's job was to independently innovate. So he was in this job, and his boss said to him, Bill, I want you to work on the firewall. And this is before there was one. And he was like, okay. They probably called it something else. And he said, okay. And he got as far as he could. And he realized he couldn't finish it on his own because who invents anything by themselves anyway? You've always got somebody help.
Yeah.
So he was thinking to himself, I'm going to be a failure. I'm not going to be able to finish this. And then he took himself in his office wheelie chair and he wheelied himself over to this guy, Steve. And he said, hey, Steve, I know that you know this different kind of engineering than I know. Can you walk me through and we could see if we can figure this out? Steve had nothing to gain from helping him. Steve had his own work to do. He's going over and he's helping Bill with Bill's problem that Bill has. So he helps him, and together they ended up cracking the code of this. They wrote the first book on internet firewalls, and off they went. But that was really how it works. Bill could have said, "I'm a strong, independent guy," and we wouldn't have the firewall. And Steve could have been a jerk. Um, But when I tell this story, it sounds like a normal work day that anybody could have.
Yeah.
And that's really how it works. And that's how all of the big inventions happen. So if you're thinking that you're a strong, independent man or a strong, independent woman, you're probably going to fail. That's just how it works.
And if you ask for help, then you could invent the next evolution of the firewall.
Who knows? The next thing is that you're going to
Yeah,
create.
exactly.
Really, you can't do it all by yourself. You don't know enough. If you're a hardware engineer, you need a software engineer. If you are, somebody who thinks about the physical aspects of the world, you need somebody who knows the emotional aspects. And then another who knows the cognitive aspects. We all can't know everything. We have to work together.
I love that. It's such a great way to put it too. And we're not we can't know everything. Like even no matter how we try, there'll be something that we don't know.
Right, exactly. It'd be like having one, I don't know if you call it football or soccer where you are, but if you have
Yeah.
one person on the team, they cannot win that against a team on the other side. You have to have others, no matter how strong and good you are. You need your other players with you at all times.
That is such a great metaphor. I like that. And so you provided such great insights and some actionable steps already throughout this episode. But I would love to close it off by asking what's a really actionable step the listeners can do if they've gone, I want to take mentorship more formally. I would like to be a mentor and give back. What's a really actionable step they can do? I know you mentioned find someone who is potentially struggling and offer them to help. Is there something else that you would recommend as well?
I really and truly believe that all we have to do is literally look to our left and look to our right, because you're going
Yeah.
to then see that person differently, and you're going to see if they need help or if they can help you. Every person fits that bill for one or the other. So simply look to your left and look to your right, and do that every single day.
I love that. And I'm going to challenge the listeners a little bit more and say, as soon as you finish listening to this episode, go identify that person
Yeah,
and see what impact that has on your day and their day as well.
absolutely. Even better. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Deborah, for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I look forward to sharing this wisdom with the world.
Thank you. And thank you again for having me on your show.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I hope this was helpful. If you thought of someone while listening to this podcast, I would be so grateful if you could share this episode with them. While you're doing that, please also take a moment to leave a review on the podcast if you haven't yet already. It takes less than a minute and it means so much to me and helps this podcast to reach more people just like you. Thank you so much for that, and I'll see you in the next episode. In the meantime, go out and achieve every dream you have, because actually, you can.